we do two music and it's kind of legion. It's at
So what are you doing? Nothing. Nothing? Why not? Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website. Sounds like a cool website. Yeah, it's alright. Oh, I might have it. You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cannabis and Coffee with me, Tamarijuana. I'd like to put a great big shout out this morning to Haley Rose. It's her 25th birthday today, as well as Jessa Frost. It's his 40th birthday today. So, Jessa, happy birthday to you. And Tracy Curley, it's also her birthday this morning or today as well. So, happy birthday to those three great people that I know that are in my life, and I appreciate them all. This morning, we're looking at a little bit of gray skies in the Kootenay, but that's usual these days. But spring is sprung, and the snow is leaving, which pushes us towards, closer to the festivals that are coming up in this summer. Global Marijuana, well, actually 420s in a week. So we got April 20th coming up next Friday, so I'm sure everybody's getting geared up for that. This morning, I'd like to welcome one of my... Well, I don't even know how to describe Dennis. I've been watching Dennis on Facebook probably for the last 10 years. He's an activist out of the United States. Him and Adela Falk have been working diligently with POW 420, trying to help inmates in the States for years. He's very active in our community up here as well. He's spoken at the Mum Cup for 2 years in a row. I'd like to welcome Dennis to the show from California. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Claire. How are you doing?
Oh, you're plugging away as usual, nothing ever stops us moving up here. And then you were telling me it's like 70 degrees down there already?
Yes, it's 70 already, and this is 9 o'clock in the morning for me.
It's just 9:45 here too, so it's beautiful, beautiful. So I guess my first question will be to you, like everybody else, it's the who, what, where's, and whys. Who are you, and why did you get involved in the cannabis movement in the States?
I have been interested in ending prohibition to cannabis since the 70s. And I ultimately went to work for the city of San Diego, so I have a pension, so I could dedicate myself full-time to doing it. And the reason I've gotten involved in ending cannabis prohibition is because it's tyranny. There is no reason for it. It's been used to discriminate against people. It's been demonized so that wealthy people like Hearst in the paper industry for his newspapers didn't have to compete with other newspapers who then would be able to buy paper products to put their newspapers on from somebody else other than Hearst. He had controlled the monopoly on printing paper. And then the Rockefellers weren't too happy about hemp being able to be used as a fuel. So that basically became a trifecta of tyranny and backed by powerful interests, the government caved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that continues on today. Like, really, when we look at what the corporations are, kind of doing here, as well as in the States too, with regulation and legalization recreational in California, that's not really going as well as in the direction you actually wanted it to either, is it?
I refer to Proposition 64 as the Corporate Marijuana Act. And 215 was 2 pages. So because of that, it was very simple. It became bulletproof. You couldn't attack it. It was just, and it went through the courts for years. And people the prosecution seemed to ignore things that was in place with it. So now they have a law that's like 65 pages. It involves taxes and all sorts of other things. And we have a Bureau of Cannabis Control. And I think ultimately it's going to put more people in jail than it let out.
Yeah. And in the U.S., like, you can go to jail for life for cannabis in some states.
Yes, you can.
And I was, and this is kind of silly, but, watching Live PD, for example, last weekend, and they arrested a poor guy. He's working and he had one joint, but because he had prior convictions, if he would have been never had been, convicted of a drug charge before, they would have just let him go with a infraction, like a misdemeanor, I guess is what you call them down in the States. This poor guy had one joint and they actually handcuffed him and took him off to jail. And I was like, you don't ever expect to see somebody going to jail for a joint. But I did. I watched it live on, in the States last weekend. It was like, oh my God, it does. Like, not that I'm not shocked about it, but I mean, it's just like, there it was. Like, you don't, you hear about it, there's people sitting incarcerated down there for it, but then there it is, right? And it was just, wow. But one joint, this guy had one joint.
There's one of actually I went and visited him in prison and pretty close to his family now. Chris Martin, when he was in college, he got busted for a joint. He lost his scholarship. He basically forgot all about it. And later on, he started a company in Arizona making medical bars, and he called them, I can't think of the name of it now. Anyways, he got busted because other interests wanted to control his business. He's in the process of making a documentary about it. It's really insane. Anyways, he ended up doing 2 years because they nailed him with a gun charge, which is another thing in the States. They like to add on to sentences. So committing a felony with a gun adds you in mandatory 5 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So even though he had complied with the law, they were looking for some way that he broke it. And how he ended up doing 2 years was because he was in possession of a key ring that was his wife's key ring. And on that key ring was a key to his shed to where his wife had locked up the gun she got from her father. And because he was caught in possession of the key ring with the key to the shed on it, then he was a felon and a felon with a gun. That's how
absolutely
twisted they get. It is insane on many levels. And
absolutely.
Are you familiar with the concept of asset forfeiture?
We spoke about that before, but yes, I am familiar with it. And they do that up here too with the asset forfeitures.
I think it's Oklahoma. I'm not sure, but it's one of the Midwest states where now the police officer grabs your ATM card and they drain your account.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You're kidding. Like, how can they do that? Wow. It's not because they're shutting bank accounts down up here too, right? Like, I've got somebody that I know, Sean Howell, actually. He was on my show a couple weeks ago, and he was busted in the gray matter of trying to get a production license with designated growing patient licenses, and Health Canada had paperwork, held up for 9 months, the scenario, right? And he had a huge garden going up in outside of Calgary, and they busted him. It's been a year since I think he goes to trial coming up here. He went to court he was busted March 24th. He's coming up to go to court. It's been over a year since the charges. They took his house, his farm, closed down his bank accounts, shut down parts of his business because he had other business besides just what he was doing with the cannabis. They've basically stripped him of all his rights, and this is up here. And he's not been convicted of anything. And that's the same scenario too, right?
The same scenario. And in the United States, it's a civil matter. When they confiscate your property, it's not criminal, it's civil. Mm-hmm. So in order for you to get it back, you have to sue them civilly. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, he's found not guilty and we're going to all go home and smile.
Right, and give it back to you.
Right. Yeah, so then, one thing we forget about, and I like to talk about, is the concept of billable hours. And when you hire a lawyer, he bills you by talking to you and the time he has to put into the case. So if people don't pay attention to billable hours, like when you're talking to them, you ask them, is this a friendly conversation or am I getting billed for it?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to keep track of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when we're on this subject, make sure you have an agreement to how much it's going to cost before the trial and how much it's going to cost for the trial.
Mm-hmm.
Typically what happens is you'll pay a retainer of anywhere from 10 to 20 grand. And then he goes through all the pleading and the BS that goes with all that. And then you get ready to go to trial and they'll say, oh, by the way, now that we're going to trial, it's going to cost you another $5,000 more.
Yeah.
This is a typical move I've seen in 3 countries now.
Yeah.
So,
I know, right?
And that's, excuse me, that's one of the problems is people get involved in a system that never had any criminal inkling at all. So they have no understanding of training how it works. And they get picked up into it and they get swallowed alive.
Yeah.
The system is based on intimidation, so in coercion. So they accuse you of things that they could never possibly charge you with and prove anyway, just to help intimidate.
Right.
And it gets you to cop a plea because they don't want to go through the trouble of paying to go to court. They want free money.
That's right. Absolutely. And it's, like I said, similar. There's quite a bit of difference between our legislations and laws comparably to the U.S. But when it comes to cannabis, even looking at the new regulations we have coming forward, you look at the, whole minor, like the minor, like if you're caught selling to a minor, you're going to go to jail for 14 years. Like that seems, ridiculous to anybody, but they haven't taken the criminality out of, like, prohibition's still there. Like, when you look at it, there's still criminal charges attached to cannabis. And that's one thing we were fighting against. Like, ending prohibition means no criminality to cannabis.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can't, I like to point out, you can't regulate tyranny.
Right.
Cannabis prohibition is tyranny, and you can't regulate it. That's the very nature of the beast. And that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I think this over-regulation that it's going to do is just going to cause more mayhem. You know what I mean? When I'm saying, like, the black market's not going to go away, people are just going to say, fuck you. Like, we're not, to the average person, I know that this is not too bad of a legislation, 30 grams to hold and 4 plants and da-da-da-da. But to any one of us that actually know, that's still bullshit. Like, it's just not right. Like, there's still laws attached to a plant, and it's not ideal.
No, and for instance, they don't take into account with 4 plants. Plants get sick. This is one of the arguments I made, is that a plant shouldn't be counted as a plant until it's ready to harvest.
Right.
If you're gonna, and this is what they do in the States, is they take a seedling that just busted the shell, and they count that as if it was a full plant and what it would be able to produce.
Yeah.
Well, between when it comes out of the seed and when it becomes a full-grown plant, there's a lot of things that can happen besides whether it's a male or a female plant. So,
or whether it's even going to get off the plate. You know what I mean? Like, is it even off the plate yet, right? In the dirt, never mind.
Exactly. So this is one of the problems. I've seen some court cases in the States where they weighed the dirt in the pot to add weight to what they had confiscated.
Yeah, it's not too far off that they do that here too. Bob and Jan Sear got busted up in Stony Plain, and the RCMP ripped their garden apart. Like, they left 4 feet of 4 feet of dirt, I think, on the basement floors. Like, just destroyed it. Like, they have, like, the RCMP up here can be quite tyrannic as well, with knowing what they're doing is wrong, and almost getting, like, pleasure in knowing that they're taking out people's medicine. I know there's not every cop is like that, but you have the ones that are, and you just want to just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like, are you not human? Like, do you not understand? And that's the thing. Like, in our society, we figure that we've come so far. We've educated ourselves. We know what benefits cannabis has medicinally, recreationally, whatever. What's wrong with the general public just kind of taking 4 minutes to realize you know what I mean? Like, it's still baffling to me that there's so many ignorant people. Never mind in the States, even up here. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. The trouble is the brainwashing took. I find one of the interesting ironies is seen as basically our government's been using, it's basically feeding everybody propaganda on both sides of the border. And people buy into it because it's a lot easier to buy into the propaganda than be responsible. I mean, that goes back to the Cold War. And so what happens is we have to defeat the propaganda. People have to become educated. And if you think Anslinger, when he started this whole thing, sorry. An example is the UN Charter clearly states that if they're going to have a drug on their prohibition status, it has to have been studied. If it isn't studied, they can't do it. Guess what's a class 1 narcotic in the UN's list that has never been studied?
Well, cannabis, of course. And
now we have the industrial, which is a real problem. We have the industrial prison complex, which basically cannabis prohibition has fed into. And I believe you're getting some for-profit prisons in Canada now.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. Well, we've been hearing that for years. I'm not sure. I haven't I have a family member that works in the provincial system in Alberta, and as far as I know, it's still ran and paid for by the province, but they do contract, said the laundry out and the food and stuff out. So it's partially privatized for contract, like the hospitals too, right? So before it was usually, I know the prison guards themselves are still paid for by the province, but the people that bring the food and bring the laundry and stuff in aren't. They're all private companies that are then paid for by the province, right? So I'm not really sure. I haven't myself personally done a lot of investigation into that. I know some of my friends have. So it's possible, yes.
Then the other thing now is who controls the food. So if you have an outside kitchen, are they meeting the standards for prisoners, or are they just throwing whatever they want in and nobody's paying attention?
Well, that's an absolute possibility, right? Because who's regulating that too, right?
Yeah, if you don't have a system in place to make your subcontractors accountable, then they can cheat, and if they cheat, they will. If they can, they will. So, I had enforced contracts for the city of San Diego, and was involved in this concept of contracting out. Well, if you force them to document and put it in an even playing field or live up to the standard that's in place, you'll find a lot of these guys won't even bother bidding on the contract.
Yeah.
That isn't about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems. There is this I've heard for years, and I'm really waiting to get pictures of it, but I believe it's true. They serve food in U.S. prisons that's not fit for human consumption, and it says that on the box.
I wouldn't doubt that. I wouldn't doubt that for a minute. And with the different privacy laws that we have here, we can't, we don't have access to the prisoners in Canada, but you're aware of that. We're going to take a quick break here, Dennis, and then come back and talk about more about the private prison systems that you have in the States and the fact that we can't get access to our prisoners in Canada to find out who they are and to help them. So we'll be right back. I'd like to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, the Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society, MUM, Maritime United for Medical Marijuana, and the Haley Rose Foundation. We'll be right back after Grimskunk Sensi.
Hey, this is Cheech.
And this is Chong.
And you're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
What is it?
Lifestyle Radio. Say it one more time.
420 radio?
Ooh.
Hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
All right, and we're back with Dennis as we're all having a coughing fit because we're all enjoying a DB over the break. We're laughing. Good time to start hacking as you get on the break. So we were talking about private prisons and the privacy policies that we have in Canada, which makes it so that our prisoners are not accessible like they are in the States. Like, we've got this privacy so that you can't find out who's in jail, what they're in jail for in Canada, where in the US you have access to them a little easier, correct?
Correct. We also sent out a newsletter to prisoners once we were able to locate one, and they would share it around the prison, so we were able to get information to them that way. But yeah, that's what I find really interesting about the Canadian law. It's framed in the idea that they're protecting the prisoner's rights, when in reality, all you're doing is disappearing them.
Well, that makes it so they're invisible.
Right, and the only thing that really a prisoner has is that somebody knows he's there. Somebody's paying attention to him, so they're a little bit more careful about the way they treat him. But if you can virtually eliminate them from the planet, then where do they go for help? Or who is going to pay attention to what happened to them? And
well,
again,
that's very true.
And with cannabis, which is basically tyranny, and is tyranny, they're thinking that they're a criminal. That's one of the problems is through the years of brainwashing, somebody using cannabis in the back of their mind and thinking, I'm breaking the law. Well, the problem is you're not breaking the law. The government's breaking the law. And they're getting you into this whole paranoid stage where it makes people psychotic.
Well, it's intimidation, right? Like, and that's what I tell a lot of my patients, because a lot of them are coming into this new program, non-consumers, right? And a lot of them are seniors that have been told over the years and over again that, it's the devil's lettuce and it's going to dry, and when you're trying to tell a 70-year-old or a 65-year-old that you have to go in this open-minded. You have to let go of all the stigma that you've been taught. You have to not be afraid. You have a license now. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not illegal. And that takes that paranoia and anxiety side effect, I think, partially away. Not saying it doesn't, because sometimes, just the strain will bring that side effect to you. But I think if you, when you're dealing with people that are just going into the medicinal side of it. So again, with the brainwashing, because over the years, for 70 years, we've all been told that if you start smoking cannabis, you're going to be undermotivated. You're never going to finish school. You're never going to amount to anything. You're just going to be a deadbeat loser sitting in, your mother's basement playing video games. You keep telling a kid over and over again that that's what they're going to do. They're going to do it because that's what you've told them they're going to do. So one message to give to the youth of Canada is smoke cannabis and be excelling, be better than the next guy. Educate yourself to the highest ability that you possibly can and prove to everybody that cannabis is not bad. Because that's kind of how I had put it to my kids at one point. If you're going to smoke this, you better make sure your grades are the highest in the class, and you better make sure that you're the best on that team, because you're not going to let cannabis down, is basically what I was trying to let them know. Like, don't make cannabis be your gateway to being lazy, and that's, I think, the stigma that we've all had, the fact that it's bad, that it leads to bad things, it leads a gateway to harder drugs. It's all bullshit. Every last line of that is bullshit. So where do what do you tell the youth of tomorrow about cannabis when they're trying to tell you you can't have it, but you can have 5 grams, but you might get charged if you have more than 5 grams. It's just the mixed messages, hypocrisy on so many levels.
I like to point out that basically there's no such thing as recreational marijuana, that it's all medical. And when you understand that, you realize that this is just crazy. And for me, people think you're going to use it and you're going to be using it for medical reason, whether you know it or not. The endocannabinoid system is the very basic system that manages how our body works. And that needs cannabis. It needs THC molecules. It needs CBD molecules to function properly. And this is part of the science that's been completely denied and is just becoming recognized. And I was told by one of the other senior cannabis activists that when we understand what the endocannabinoid system is, it's going to be like learning Earth isn't flat.
Absolutely. And that's the breakdown, the research. right? You got people that are going to jail for a plant. You've got doctors that can't do anything because they haven't got research to dose the plant. It's a plant. We can't patent a plant because of, I mean, we all know that even on one plant you can have different buds and it's all different. It's just, it's a huge amount of information to absorb for any one of us that have been self-educating ourselves for years. I can't imagine what it's like to, the average person that doesn't even catch a clue. They just want to, enjoy the plant. And I think that we've overcomplicated things over the years because we've had no choice but to. Because people come up to me now and say, what's the difference between a CBD and a THC and a CBN? And I'm standing there, my head's reeling going, 20 years ago, I couldn't have given two rats' asses about THC, CBD, or anything. I just wanted to know if it smelled good, looked good, and if it was going to work. Now it's got to be, what strain is it? And
when I was at the Mom Cup, I was introduced to a dude who was a connoisseur, and he was going, as he's a connoisseur, and he's going on about the smell and about that. And I go, sometimes the plant doesn't look good, but it really is effective. And sometimes it looks great, and it really is not. So we went on a little bit, and he went about how he grades it, and I finally looked at him and said, but does it get you high?
Right. I agree.
So, and then he went, oh, yeah. So I said, yeah, the rest is all just sort of BS. But
the thing is, now people aren't looking for the high. Remember, now we've got the CBD train, and everything's about not getting high. It's all about the medicinal compounds that you can get off CBD. And there's so many misconceptions about what's right and what's wrong and what you should be taking and what you shouldn't. Like I said, we've fucking have overcomplicated this to the point where no wonder doctors' heads are spinning, because you walk into their office and say, well, I want CBD oil. And they look at you going, what the hell is that? Because cannabis to them has always just been about getting high. And now people don't want to get high.
Well, the other thing, what's wrong with being high?
That's my whole point. Like,
I go, oh, you get drunk, and what's that, right? So, like, in fact, that's the whole point of the medications that they prescribe for you, is to get you high so you don't think about the pain. So, I mean, this is one of some of the subtleties. In California, with 215, the original medical law, the doctors are forbidden to prescribe how much cannabis you can use. They can only say whether you can use it or not, okay? So now you're in court. So the doctor is being asked how much cannabis the patient can use, and he can't testify to it. So who's left that can say how much somebody uses for cannabis a day? It's the detectives. So what are the detectives going to do? They're going to lowball the figures. And they're going to say, well, I'm talking to a guy, and this is what they tell me when I'm interviewing a prisoner. Well, of course, if you're interviewing a prisoner, you're not going to tell me you're using 2 tons a day. You're going to lowball it for him. So the whole impression of how much cannabis is effective is completely false, because because the cops are testifying, and they really don't have any understanding how it works medically. It's but what they do to give the police latitude is, it's called my experience and training allows me to make these statements. So what's that mean?
Yeah, experience. Well, it's kind of like our limits here. It's all about money. It's all about what Veteran Affairs would have, are willing to pay the veterans for their cannabis use. So because, the government's only willing to pay, but, for maximum 5 grams a day, that's pretty much limited everybody to a maximum grammage between 3 and 5 grams a day. And it's got nothing to do on how much we need or how much we, can afford or anything about, anything else. It's all about what the government is willing to pay a certain entity to. It's not even everybody. They're not willing to pay for every medical cannabis user's cannabis. They're willing to pay for the veterans. And the cap is 5 grams a day. So to me, whether that's true, that's my conception of it. It's basically left us with that 5 gram cap, telling every physical or physician in college across the country that's all we're allowed to have. And again, with the insurance companies, I guess Sun Life now has come in and saying that they will pay for, a certain portion of from a licensed producer too. So again, it's corporate feeding, government feeding corporate.
Oh, absolutely. They had one of the things I tell people is when you're filling out the paperwork in the States, they ask you how much the patient uses a day. So again, because of the paranoia and because of the brainwashing, people will put a lower number down. I tell them, put 5 pounds a day. Put 50 pounds a day. You get busted and you go to court, where they're going to say how much you use a day. I take a bath in it, man. I eat it, I drink it, I use it for soap, and I use oil light my house. I use 50 pounds a day easy.
That's good. That's true though, because how can they tell you what you need and what they don't need? Like it's any pharmaceutical. That's hilarious. So
yeah, that's how I get around the cops lying. I go, okay.
Oh, we got some comments out there. Hi, Rob Lamar. He's commenting, when the cops talk in court, it's called testifying, or not testifying, test-a-lying. Yeah, test-a-lying.
Yeah.
That's true. That's very true. And that's the thing, like, because we have like people that are afraid. People aren't going to go in and, like, I've got, people that say to me, well, how much should I be smoking a day? I feel like I'm smoking too much. And people are looking like it's not anybody's business how much you're smoking a day. If you're going to, like, if you go into your doctor and say, okay, I personally have whatever per gram per day, it's not up to your friends or your family. What makes you feel good for the day? Some people are good on a couple grams a day and don't need anything more than that. And I've got people that need up to 20 or 30 grams a day. And I'm not kidding, especially when you're using with extraction, right? So we'll get back to the, like, across the borderline, because how many states now are actually legal in the States for medical and recreational?
I believe there's only 4 right now. And that, the regulations for medical are all different. This is one of my favorite quotes that I heard from a police officer making a testimony, sitting in to you in the standing in the box, for us sitting in the chair. She said, "Just because you're complying with the law doesn't mean you're not breaking it." Let that settle down a little bit. And, for instance, in the U.S., you're always breaking the federal law. There's no way that you can consume cannabis without breaking a federal law.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, right now, there's a congressman that have actually taken, you talking about using money, part of the budget bill is that the Department of Justice cannot use any of their funding to go after medical marijuana patients. And that's already been tried in the court, and the case got thrown out because they didn't have the funding to go after them. If that isn't a clear statement of where the people are and the government is, and to me, it's a constitutional crisis. Is what we're looking at right now.
Well, it's the same as here. They're going to tax our cannabis so what they can give it to police forces to police us for it. Like, what the fuck is that? You're going to charge us tax so you can police us with it? Like, we don't want any police having to be attached to it. So why in the hell are you going to tax me to feed it to a police force to fucking police me on how many plants I've got or how many grams I've got or whether I bought it from a licensed producer or not? Like, it just seems like a bloody waste of time and taxes. Again, should be being put towards other things that are more imperative than worrying about whether you got 5 grams, 30 grams, what fucking licensed producer it came from or didn't come from. It's ridiculous.
I was in one case where they had the lead detective open up a bag, right? Because he claimed it was scales. That's another thing. That's supposed to be your dealing, is if you have a scale. Well, I go, it's not just pot you use a scale for. You might use it for dietary reasons. You might use it for any one out of 100 dozen reasons. But anyways, the point is, he pulls this stuff out that was labeled as scales, and they were video games.
Yeah.
So
I know.
they were trying to say, look, why does somebody need 5 scales? Is what the prosecution wanted to say. Well, there wasn't 5 scales. There were a bunch of video games.
Oh, man. Jeez. And that's the thing, evidence. On that note, we're going to, again, take another little quick break here, and we'll come back and talk more about that because, scales, because I've got one for my dog food, for example. So I'd like again to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society, Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana. Their Harvest Fest is coming up July 20th, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of July. You can get a hold of Debbie Stoltz-Giffes at chair@mum.ca for tickets and any availability on Facebook as well. At the Haley Rose Foundation, again, it's Haley's 25th birthday, so everybody a shout out to Haley Rose and Cheryl, her terrific mom. We'll be right back after the salads, weed and wine.
Are you looking for cannabis news, education, and people's opinions? Are you looking to learn what Canadian and international cannabis advocates are doing, not only now, but what got them to this point in their lives, and what does the future hold for them? Do you want to learn how patients are using cannabis as their daily medication, or learn how their cannabis use helps them with their medical condition? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I'm going to suggest to you to tune in to Lifestyle Radio. Catch their live weekly shows and have your questions and concerns answered and find the experience you're looking for. Monday, catch your weekly news broadcast with the Reef Reporters. Then on Wednesday, get several hours worth of cannabis public education. We get things started with Cannabis and Coffee with Tamarijuana. Then tune in and catch Pottawa with Russell Barth, who calls himself the world's angriest pothead. Finish up your evening with the award-winning Pace Radio Show with Al Graham and joint host Kim Cooper and Alicia Yashishin. No week would be complete without tuning into Friday night's program, the 420 Radio Show featuring Al Rapp and the 420 Radio crew, Mary Jane Baker and Marcel Gignac. Cannabis is a lifestyle, and you can catch all your cannabis lifestyle information right here at lifestyleradio.net or at our sister site, 420radio.ca.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Red wine goes nice with
Okay. Okay. And we're back with Dennis. And I have not a clue what we were talking about before. No, I'm kidding.
We were talking about cannabis.
Yeah, and that's why we forgot. No, that's another misconception that with prohibition and propaganda that we've been fed over the years that we're all just unintelligent stoners, and I'm just so sick of that. Like it just. So I'm hoping, like I said, coming forward, that with the new prohibition 2.0, because there's really no other way of looking at it. Like I'm not unhappy that we were coming to this, like that we will be able to have 30 grams, and yes, you'll be able to grow 4 plants. Those are all great steps forward. I still, like I said, it's still prohibition. As long as there's criminality attached to the plant, there's no other way of looking at it. So that being said, we've got all kinds of things coming up, like April 420. Where do you plan on being for 420, Dennis?
I'm going to be in Vancouver.
Oh, yeah. I might be in Vancouver, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to arrive in Vancouver on the 19th. So
I'll
be
that's
there
excellent.
just a time. Yeah. Getting ready to go to Australia.
That's right. You're going to Nimbin. Yeah, you're going to the Nimbin Festival. Yeah, that's right. May's going down there too. You guys might leave May the 6th, I think. She said you guys are heading that way as well, which is exciting to have, just even coming up to Canada and having the variety of different knowledge from different countries, because Australia is now looking at Canada for regulation too, apparently. And other countries are now going to be looking at Canada, because we will be the first country in the world to actually have a federal legal program that's not like the States where it's, state to state.
Uruguay, I believe, has legal cannabis now.
That's right. They were the first one. They've been ahead of us by about 10 years, I think, already. But I mean, different. There are different regulations than we have too that Canada's adopting. So they're fairly similar, but not the same too. And I know we've looked at Denver, which I'm not sure is a good thing either.
No, it gets convoluted, because what happens is they don't want to give up control. And that's something they should have never had in the first place. So it gets into this convoluted thing of how we're going to control it. And ultimately, they want to go after the growers, as you know. I mean, that to me, they're the heroes in the industry, because you can't go anywhere. I mean, if they come after you, you can't hide, you can't dodge. You're there, standing there with your plants and watching your garden get destroyed. And that's one of the problems of the idea that it's illegal, the whole concept. People have to get over that. They have to get over the fact that although they are, in fact, breaking the law, that law is wrong, and that they're not a criminal. You can break the law and not be a criminal, I believe. That's what tyranny is about. Throwing the tea in Boston Harbor was a criminal act, but that wasn't the motivation, was to be a criminal.
Right.
So
I don't think any one of us that smoke pot are setting out to be criminals. I don't think that cannabis, like, you know what I mean? Like, people that consume cannabis are not setting out to break other laws. I mean, that's just not, I don't even know how to, it's just not the case.
Exactly. There's a bad law. One of the problems I see now is because of the media, is they have a tendency to get people to think emotionally instead of logically. So you end up with a bunch of bad laws, and you end up not really addressing the problem. You're going around it any other way, and the right it's still a problem is because you're not addressing it. To deny that that cannabis is a positive plant that we've been using for 2,000 years, that is absolutely, we are dependent on for all sorts of things in the past. And now what's happened is we've gone to synthetic fiber, we've gone to et cetera, and it's destroying the environment. Mm-hmm. Right? They're whining about the pieces of plastic that are being found in the ocean that fish are eating and that stuff. Well, that wouldn't have been a problem with hemp, because you can eat hemp. So now what's happened is we put a synthetic fiber in that even if you talk to a bosun's mate on a tall ship, they want to use hemp because it doesn't destroy their fingers when they're slicing it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just go on, and you see that. And also, by the way, hemp doesn't deteriorate in the sun like plastic does. So this is the insanity of greedy people and the government to back their insanity. It just never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
One of my claims to fame is I actually got permission to use cannabis while I worked for the city of San Diego. And I was walking down the hall with a friend, and he says, "Dennis, you smell like weed all the time." I said, "Leave me alone. It's my cologne." I did use an expletive.
Well, that's the thing. Like, in reality, if hemp would have never been taken out, because we know that was, main, project at one time in the early 1900s to get rid of all the hemp, think where we'd be. Like, if everything was still made from hemp, but, we'd still have ropes and all, that weren't deteriorating. Maybe our roads wouldn't be deteriorating. Nothing would be deteriorating. And maybe then, they wouldn't be spending our tax dollars on refixing stuff that really wouldn't need to be fixing. It's just a horrible loop of economic downfalls from, the early 1900s that nobody even seen the repercussions for, 70 years later. And now 70 years later, we're paying for it environmentally, economically, with tyranny still, people being put in prison for something that's not and nor should have never been criminal. It's just ridiculous. Like I said, ridiculous doesn't even seem to be the word that covers it. There are no words to cover that. And the fact that they've used it as a racist tool to bring, add to the slavery issue that the United States has had, there are no words. There's absolutely no words for that.
I look at cannabis prohibition and all this regulation stuff the same as Jim Crow laws, that wanted to continue discrimination. That's what they were, and that's what it is. It's basically discriminating against people that want to use something I believe is a God-given right to use, is cannabis. And they've stigmatized it with absolute propaganda. That's how they started, and then that just evolved and evolved. I mean, basically it was discriminating against the Mexicans because we were in a depression and we needed to put people in what would have been menial tasks. And then it was used to discriminate against African Americans. So it's been a tool of discrimination and causing people to go into paranoia when it's supposed to be something that's a medicine that everybody should take daily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In fact, I take hemp oil for cholesterol because I'd rather than fish oil, because who knows what contamination the fish are now. At least the hemp oil I know is clean.
Yeah. And it does have the same contributors like the omegas that fish oil has, hemp oil. And that's like, hemp seed oil. We're not talking, it does have CBD compounds in it too, but it's not so much what you need there's other CBD compounds and other full spectrum plant from the cannabis that are needed too. So, but I know even with Dad, with, his diabetes, I told him to eat hemp seeds, like, the raw hemp seeds, that they're very beneficial because of the omegas in just the plant, in the seed matter itself and the oil that comes from the seed. But yeah, hemp is a full, crop that was just lost. It was almost like a heritage crop, if you want to call it that now. And in reality, we should be looking at all aspects of that, including, for fuel and so many other aspects. We're going to be wrapping up here in the next little bit. So let's, maybe shout out to some people like Adela Falk. What's she doing down in the States right now? I hear she's running for office.
She is in her district in Missouri, the 43rd district, is basically farmers and is a rural district. And the House of Representatives seat in the state legislature was up for grabs. There was nobody running for it. So Adela decided that she was going to run for the seat. And right now it's the primary. And originally it was two people, and at the last minute they put a third person in. Usually in American politics, if they add a third person to any ticket, whether it's presidential or any government or even mayors, what they're trying to do is split the votes because they're worried that she's attracting enough votes that she could win. So a way to do that is to try and get the people that would be voting for her to maybe vote for a third party, to lead off the votes. So to me, to see that she was getting, she got a third candidate literally the day before they closed to register is to me a good sign for her, but could be also problematic.
Right.
Yes,
maybe that's good. She's got some traction. That's excellent.
Yeah. And one of the things we talked. Yeah. So I think it's pretty good. One of the things she was worried about is she says, like with the shootings that were here, that, she wouldn't want to respond emotionally. She'd upset her and she'd be crying, but she wouldn't want to give a response. And I said, that's exactly what you need to do. I mean, with this deal in Florida, the more you find out about it, you find out this guy was turned into the cops 4 or 5 times. Nobody in authority wanted to do anything about it. Till finally he goes off the deep end after his mother dies, and all of a sudden it's everybody else's fault except the people that were responsible for dealing with it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, and that's the thing. It is something that could have been, proactively taken care of with mental health issues, right, within the state. Now it's become a federal issue.
Well, not only that, it should have been taken care of by the FBI was informed. They didn't do anything about the sheriff's department was informed. The local police departments, nobody went in to interview them or say anything. And if this, and be able to, even if you have your registry, right, if you don't send the data to the registry when they pull up the name, they're not going to stop them because they don't know to. This, again, is another breakdown of the system. So adding more laws isn't going to solve the issue.
No, I think it's a good topic, though, because it does lead to the fact that, it was a teenager, right, that could have been intervened by mental health and healthcare issues.
Right.
And because your system is broken for healthcare, too, which leads to medical marijuana as well, which is involved in the healthcare, your system in the States, because of your healthcare system, too, leaves people falling through the cracks that need help with mental health issues that cannot afford it. And it's no different here. You know what I mean? If you don't have extended benefits, like Alberta Healthcare or BC Healthcare or whatever, don't cover psychiatrists and social workers and counseling. If you don't have extended benefits, and if you don't have a family that can, be, or a school, it all boils down to, where do you start? Home, school, whatever. But they want us to teach, that law enforcement, again, is something that should not be involved in that. It should be a health issue. Like any other drug issue with mental health, drug issues, it should be health issues. So really, we should be looking at pumping up our healthcare systems with these taxations on cannabis rather than law enforcement. That's just, kind of spin it around back down to where it should go.
Exactly. And all this stuff is fed by the media getting people to act emotionally instead of using their brain. The idea is to keep us in a state where we're thinking with our lizard brain rather than with our intellectual part of our brain.
Absolutely. Well, good luck to Adela. I hope she does well in the primaries. I'm not, I don't watch much of the U.S. politics. It's too scary for me. It's not that it's scary. It's just almost like watching The Simpsons. I don't even know how to put it. That's some episode of The Simpsons kind of thing.
It is. It is crazy. I like on Sunday morning I watch a couple of talking heads just to get an idea where the mass media is trying to steer people. But it is, I have one of my favorite phrases is, don't confuse me with the facts when I know I'm right.
Yeah, exactly right. So what do you got coming up? You're going to Australia. You're coming up to Canada. What else have you got on your plate? What else are you working on?
I'm going to help Adele a little bit with her campaign just before the primary elections. And then I pretty much left things open. I don't know where I'm going to be, but that's why I worked myself into this position, so I didn't have to worry about it.
That's right, eh? You can just kind of go where it flow and be where you have to be, and that's great. Okay, well, we'll give some shout outs today to, let's see, Harvest Fest is coming up July. We've got April 20th. coming up, and I don't know. I might be in Vancouver. I'm not even sure right at this point. I was offered a trip to go out, but I'm not sure if I'm going to make it out there. But I'm looking at 420. Cranbrook's having their second annual Global Marijuana March, as well as everybody else across the country up here is doing, and probably in the States as well as worldwide global marijuana or worldwide marijuana march now, which Dana Beals started years ago. We all jumped on that. So Global Marijuana March, which is May the 5th. After that, we're going into June. Out here, we're having a Sam Steele Day parade, so we'll be involved with that. July is then into Harvest Fest. There's also other cannabis cups and stuff around the country, I'm sure, that will be popping up. July, we're having, or August, we're having Kootenay Cannabis Cup first year. So if you guys are interested in sponsoring any of that or being involved in any of that, please get in touch with me because this will be our first one. We're going to try and get Dennis up for the cup and have him speak for us. And I'm also going to try and get Debbie Schultz-Giffen out from Nova Scotia, as well as Asia's May Moon is coming out to speak for us for sure. So we've got her pinned down. And the rest of it's just, waiting for everybody to figure out what they're going to do. Tickets for that will go on sale for June 1st. So let's see. Anybody you want to give a shout out to? Adela Falk for running for, Republican Party of the USA. Anybody else?
Other than she's, yeah, I can't think of anybody right offhand. POW 420 though. Please look up the website and find a prisoner to adopt. That's what it's all about. Remember that if it wasn't for bootleggers, we wouldn't be drinking beer today.
That's right, too. And absolutely, the POW420.com. You can get in touch with Adela or Dennis on Facebook as well. They do have many prisoners. Unfortunately, we can't adopt Canadian prisoners because we don't know who they are. But even if you're in Canada, you can adopt a U.S. prisoner. They can link you up through, they have internet kind of. Don't they still have that available down there, Dennis?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's all for pay. It's pay to play, but yeah, they basically, the telecommunication industry for prisons now has all been privatized. So basically the sheriff department gets a cut and the other guys run the phone system and you have to pay to talk to prisoners. But yeah that's all available. And it's just, it gets the levels money. Of insanity. Yeah, I know. It just, when I think about it, more money. That's it.
More money. More money. And that's what it seems to sound like up here too. Because it's, what, it's almost the same here, I think too. Like I don't know anybody who's sitting in prison right at the moment, but prior to, I know they had to ask for permission to phone out, and you had to put so much money in the canteen, or they'd have to phone collect, where before it was free for them to phone. So it was still somebody getting a cut of something somewhere. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I have accounts with 5 different prison companies. They either give them money or be able to call them or to communicate with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I guess, I don't even know what to say about that. I guess if the prisons are necessary for people that actually do crime. Let's put it that way. Let's not be naive. There are people out there that deserve to be behind bars. No question about that. But when it comes to cannabis, there's just no excuse for them to be behind bars. And that's, I guess, the bottom end of it.
When you think about now what I'm going to say now sounds really insane, and it is, but it's very true. If you got busted for any kind of weight of cannabis in the United States, the best thing you could do is go out and murder somebody. Because what happens, they'll charge you with murder, they'll drop the cannabis offense, and you'll do less time.
Yeah, isn't that sad?
It is.
And it's not much different up here. Like, you can grow thousands of plants, you get 14 years, you can go out and beat your kid and get, out in 6 months. People need to recognize how insane that is. That Absolutely.
you can have a life sentence. It's also, we have prisoners that are doing life without possibility of parole, and the only thing that connected them to the crime was a confidential informant who was getting benefits for ratting on people.
Oh, jeez.
And I sat through an appellate hearing and learned that. It wasn't, hearsay or anything. It was me sitting in a courtroom listening to testimony.
That's all like circumstantial. like, where's the evidence? Like, that's where I want to, where is the evidence of all this stuff? They're supposed to be so good at, proving these cases, but it's circumstantial. Well, on that note, my dear, we are going to wrap the show up. I'd like to thank you again for coming on my show. We'll have to have you back because there's always lots to talk about with you. Always, always, always. I would like to thank my sponsors again, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Mom, Maritime Representative for Medical Marijuana, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners, and the Haley Rose Foundation, and my producer, Al Rapp. You all have a great week. Next week, we're going to listen or have Brian Jones on. He's with the Canadian Canadian Parents Cannabis, Canadian Cannabis Parents Association. I will talk to you again next week, and thanks for listening.
So what are you doing? Nothing. Why not? Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website. Sounds like a cool website. Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it. You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.